Hello and welcome to The Conversation. On today's show, News Central secured an exclusive interview with Ugandan pop star and emerging political icon Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, popularly known as Bobbi Wine. We give you a first look at that interview and dissect the politics of Uganda through the eyes of Bobbi Wine after this. As usual, we're always joined by colleagues and experts, and joining me today are my colleagues Yona Masade, who's a politics broadcaster at News Central, and Gbenga Aborowa, who's also a broadcaster with us, and he himself carried out that exclusive interview with Bobbi Wine. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Sibu.
It's an honor, Mr. Aborowa.
I know, absolutely.
Okay, so let's dive straight in. You might ask yourself, who is Bobbi Wine? Let's get into that before we start our discussion. Kyagulanyi is a 37-year-old Ugandan musician who goes by the name Bobbi Wine. No stranger to political discourse, the artist has penned songs like Situka, which in Luganda means to rise up, as a response to some of the injustices he's seen in his country of birth. In 2017, he was instated as a member of parliament representing the Kyaddondo East in Wakiso District, which is in Uganda's central region. Now, in July 2019, he announced his intent to run for presidency in 2021. Called an enemy of progress by President Yoweri Museveni, Bobbi Wine has been charged with treason and allegedly tortured by the military. He's had concerts cancelled 156 times and made narrow imprisonment escapes. What's his crime, you might ask? Agitating people against what he calls repressive trends, including the amendment of the country's constitution to remove age and term limits for heads of state, social media taxes, the controversial Public Order Management Act, that's POMA, and poverty and unemployment in the face of decades-long corruption. Let's take a look at what the man himself had to say about the political climate in Uganda today.
First of all, Uganda, a mass nation, is, in my opinion, the most beautiful part of Earth. Africa is the most beautiful. Uganda is popularly known as the Pearl of Africa. So I'm proud to come from one of the most beautiful parts of this planet. Uganda is home to more than 44 million people, and 85% of those people are younger than me. So we have a population under 35 years that is 85%. 80% of these people have never seen another president. President Museveni is a military ruler that has been in power for 34 years in Uganda. He came to power when he was my age. He came to power when he was saying exactly what I was saying. One of the most popular quotes from President Museveni, he said that the problem of Africa and Uganda in particular are the leaders that overstay in power. 34 years later, he is still president. Besides that, we, of course, like many other parts of Africa, are having challenges that are solvable if at all we implement the ideas of our times. But you notice that President Museveni is an intolerant leader, ruler for that matter, that would not allow any dissent. That explains why many people have been imprisoned. Many people that dare to raise their voices against the atrocities and excesses of the Museveni regime, tortured, others disappear, never to be seen again.
Okay, so we have there Bobbi Wine speaking about the political climate in Uganda. He calls it, on the one hand, the Pearl of Africa, but on the other hand, he doesn't even want to refer to the current regime as a democracy. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about that, Gbenga.
I've been to Uganda myself a few years ago. It's a very beautiful country. I mean, it has everything. And wonderful people too. But he's not happy with the way things have been going. One of the first, he did mention the quotable quotes, and when Museveni took over from Milton Obote, he said the problem of Africa is sit tight leaders, and we've seen, 34 years later, he's still president.
And they often say that the first sign of a democracy in crisis is the amendment of the constitution.
Exactly. So, Museveni, if it's left to him, And some people have said he's declared himself as president for life. And he represents the hopes of a generation, Bobbi Wine. And it feels, why should one man be president forever? It's not like Museveni has a sterling record, or that or the per capita income of Uganda is comparable to that of Switzerland, and the standard of living. There's a lot of problems with the economy, unemployment, and dissent is frowned upon. So their freedoms, the young people don't have freedom, and they make up a huge percentage of the population. So he represents the hope of a generation.
Do you agree with that? It's not a democracy.
100%. And it's interesting. I mean, some of the things that he said there really instructive is how sensitive Museveni is to dissent. I mean, I think even just the slightest criticism, to cancel 156 what odd concerts, just because you're afraid this man is going to sing a few songs that, make you call you out for what you are. And the other thing that was quite profound to me and shocking actually is that 80% of the population has only ever known Museveni as president.
Yeah.
That is outrageous. That is outrageous. I mean, I remember in the early 90s, when he was being celebrated because, he's now, he was bringing the country into democracy. He promised at the time he was only going to be there for a single term. And he had been ruler before that. It was also instructive. He said, not leader, ruler. All of those things really tell you the kind of person who's sitting at the helm of affairs in Uganda, and how he has installed himself essentially as a king. Uganda is not a monarchy. Uganda is not a kingdom. It is a republic, and he needs to step aside.
Okay, so back to Bobbi Wine himself. We often have discussions in studio here about, it's one thing to oppose the status quo. It's another thing entirely to be fit to govern. Do you believe that his policies are strong enough? And does he have strong enough ideas about what the alternative to the current government would be? I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts, and we're going to hear from the man himself. He says, as opposed to focusing on leaders, we should focus on strong institutions. So after this, I want you to tell me what you think about his point of view. Take a look at this.
All these so-called revolutionaries were speaking the same thing at my age. So the question to all of us remains, how do we hold the leaders accountable and true to their word? My thought is the solution is building strong institutions as opposed to strong personalities, because the institutions live beyond the human weaknesses of greed and ego. If we have strong institutions, then the institutions are going to keep the sobriety that we so badly need. And yes, one American said that leaders must be from time to time reminded that the people possess the ability to rise against any kind of oppression or subjugation. So we as Africans must unequivocally rise against all the leaders that are trying to subjugate us. Because if we rise and liberate our people as a population as a whole, not as a person, I must note that Museveni and all these other dictators scattered all over Africa have always claimed, saying, oh, I liberated you, oh, I did this. So we must destroy and dismantle the I syndrome and raise the we mentality, so that even in the liberation, it's about us as a person. I've already said it before, and I continue to say it, that I'm nobody's liberator. I'm nobody's hero. I'm just one of you. I'm just another person that says no. And if it's many of us that say no, even when myself or other leaders like myself are compromised, still there will be a population to say no. And that way, we'll keep each other in check.
So strong institutions and a move away from focusing on single personalities that we center our politics around. What is your take on that, Yona?
I mean, I think he's making the right sounds. He's definitely saying the right things. That's a very democratic attitude. And he's saying that even if I do, gain the position of presidency or gain the position of leadership, even if I'm at the forefront of whatever, if I go wrong, then there's still a we to question that. There's still a we to challenge, that. And I mean, look, who knows? whether or not leaders, you know, the likelihood of him abiding by what he's saying now.
Because power corrupts, absolute power.
And it does, but this is on record. It's on record him saying, if I step out of line, challenge me too. And I think that the important thing is the principle that he's raising. He's saying democracy is a we. It's an institution of the collective. Yeah. It's not an institution of one person.
Is Uganda ready for that, that kind of politics that speaks to the collective, holding an institution accountable and making sure that the person, whoever's at the helm, understands that the institution is bigger than what they are and that it's to serve them, it's in place to serve them? It's
going to take, but like Yona mentioned earlier, a lot of this generation have only known one president.
Yes.
And the world, technology has changed the world. They've seen revolutions in the Arab Spring and all of that. So people, younger people are more assertive and they know that, look, we can demand for this thing. So I believe, and the younger people are in the majority in Uganda, so I believe they're ready for this. And Uganda's history, independence history, Milton Obote, Amin, very repressive, Obote to some extent. And then Museveni, that's been there for donkey years. So Ugandans are yearning for a new breath of fresh air and freedom. And I think Bobbi Wine offers that. He's quite genuine too and quite intelligent talking to him. I'm
going to stay with you because, you know, you were with the man and you got a sense of what his experiences have been. How much do you think he's likely to be deterred by the heavy-handedness of the state? And it's, you know, it's happening more and more and it's getting incremental.
The threshold moment, I mean, the camel that broke the icing on the back was the Arua incident when he was tortured last year. He had to be flown to America for treatment. The government denied that. They said the crutches are fake and it wasn't tortured and all of that, but people know what the truth is. And I did talk to his wife. She said she was scared. He said, I mean, it's heart of hearts. He thinks sometimes when I asked him the question, do you ever think of giving up? He said, this is bigger than me. We've crossed the Rubicon. It's a struggle for my people, for the generation I represent, and is very serious about his ambitions. And he doesn't even want to be tagged a politician. He calls it a movement. If you remember, he won his seat in parliament as an independent candidate.
Okay, well, we're going to take a very short break, but before we do, tell us what you think about young African leaders like Bobbi Wine shaking the political table. What are your thoughts on leaders like him? Use our hashtag #NCTheConversation. We're at News Central TV on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We continue to take a look at this exclusive interview with Bobbi Wine. Remember that you can also find it on our website, www.newscentral.africa. The full interview with Gbenga Aborowa of Bobbi Wine himself. You can find that on our website. But before that, continue to watch our show. We're going to take a very short break. Stay with us. And you're welcome back to the conversation. We're speaking about Ugandan opposition leader Bobbi Wine, who himself says he doesn't want to be seen as a politician. He instead embraces the term ghetto president, right? Ghetto president. Okay, so let's hear what he had to say about disenfranchised youths. He spoke about how, you know, he sees himself in very many of those young Ugandans. Let's see what he had to say about disenfranchised youths in Uganda and by extension the rest of the continent.
Uganda and indeed Africa can rewrite this narrative first and foremost by re-educating our people, not formally, but making them know that indeed this is their home. They own it. They have the power. I've seen in almost all the constitutions that I've had the opportunity to read, it is either the first or among the first provisions that all power belongs to the people. It is upon the African young people to take it, to take responsibility. It's not going to be given to them, you know. In a nation or in a community where the majority are young people and understand their problems perfectly, how come we're not taking the lead in solving them? Let's pick a leaf from places like France, like Belgium, and all these other places, and know that the young people of Africa are not too young to think for themselves. They are not too young to write their own history. If we don't do that, our futures are going to continue being decided and shaped by people that are not going to be part of those futures, because the people that are deciding our futures now are surely not going to be around to face those futures. So we better lay our bed well knowing we're going to lie in it.
Okay, so he essentially is saying that it's important to educate young people, and that's what's going to empower the disenfranchised youths. Is that
continent-wise?
Yes,
yeah.
continent-wide.
Yeah, exactly.
Continent-wide. Is that you know, enough of a statement to make? Is that a valid point to make, or is it speaking particularly to Uganda, where we know that the education rate is not where it should be, and therefore, as a result, young people are unemployed and also unemployable?
You know what? I think it's a very valid comment to make, and not just about Uganda, about most of the continent. So we're talking about building institutions.
Yeah.
So this is not really about Bobbi Wine per se.
Yes.
This is about having an Africa that can actually sustain democracy. It's about having an Africa that can sustain not just democracy for the sake of it, but democracy that delivers a better life for its people. And what people are we talking about? Most of Africa's population is a young population. And so I think the point he was making is to say, and he did say it specifically, he said, I'm not specifically, he said not formal education. So he's not talking about, you know, sort of your...
But an awareness, the ability to your civic duty to vote. You understand the importance of who you're voting for and what that means.
And the people that are making decisions that would affect you in the future, because those 70 and 80-year-olds will not be there 20 years.
There we go.
To deal with the repercussions of those decisions made.
Yeah. So I think he's talking about arming young people with the kind of information and access to information that allows them to make informed decisions and empowered decisions.
So Bobbi Wine is one of very many young people we're seeing on our continent, spearheading movements, resistance, in different parts of the continent. And we're seeing them, thanks to social media, in real time. We're seeing them connecting with each other and connecting with everyday people. How do you think this is different from, say, maybe some of the youth leaders from yesteryear? How do you think, you know, you would compare the two?
You know, there's a saying that you find a hero and then he lives along to become a villain. He did talk about Mugabe's and I mean, if Museveni had left power, that's even 10 years after he came in, he will be regarded as a hero. If Mugabe left 10 years later, he would be regarded as a hero. So we've seen, it's not the first time we've seen vibrant African youths. That a lot of the independence struggle, the Nkrumahs, the Thomas Sankara, they were young revolutionaries, Sekou and all of that. And we're seeing, I'm happy there's a new wave of young revolutionaries. We have Julius Malema of the Economic Freedom Fighters, and then Nelson Chamisa in Zimbabwe for MDC. So we've seen this wave of awareness going on, and I believe technology is going to be the game changer because it amplifies the message. You don't need a state broadcaster to
get your words across.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at what the man himself had to say about the impact he and many others like him have had across the continent, where changing the minds of people, where politics is concerned.
I don't see anything different or anything special about me. Whatever I'm doing, people have done in even greater magnitudes. Whatever I'm talking about, fella talked about extensively. Whatever I'm doing, people have done, those that are known and those that are not known. I think I, all together with the people we work with, I think we as a generation are just fortunate that we represent an idea whose time is so ripe. You know, if fella was alive in 2019, he would be 1,000,000 times more popular than myself. But maybe the factors did not favor so much then. We find ourselves, I rise in a time where Ugandans are oppressed to the point where they cannot take it anymore. It has been 34 years. I rise at a time when Uganda and indeed Africa has the youngest population in the world, a very widely connected population, informed population. So all these that you see are very many factors coming together. And myself, I'm only just one of the minor factors that fit into this. You know, it is more like a choir. It's like a choir where there's bass and alto and tenor and all these other beautiful voices. Or like a band where ultimately the band leader or the guy that stands in front of the band takes all the attention and the credit. But indeed, this is a collective effort of people that do it deliberately and others do it unknowingly. It is nature bringing all this together.
Okay, so he is essentially saying, again, I'm just one part of a bigger machinery and the continent really, this is the right time. I like what he had to say about if Fela Kuti was alive today, he'd be in a completely different space than what he was when he was alive then. And also just that what's happening now is really that the time is ripe for the ideas that have existed on our continent for very many years. I
can understand why the likes of Yoweri Museveni would be scared of this man. I mean, even I feel...
And why there's a lot of pushback.
Yeah, I feel galvanized by just, you know, those words. He's basically describing, it's almost like a force of nature. And what he's describing sounds like, you know, it's coming.
A handwriting on the wall.
Yeah, it's coming.
Prophetic.
I'm glad you brought up President Yoweri Museveni. Let's take a look at what he had to say about whether or not he has what it takes to take him on. You know that he's going to run for president in 2021. Let's take a look at what he had to say about that.
I know that very many people are skeptical about challenging President Museveni. Many people have actually given up on hope of democracy, and many are suggesting that we take up arms against him. But as a person and as a leader, I don't believe in violence. Museveni took up guns in 1980, and by 1986, 500,000 Ugandans had died. It costed 500,000 lives for Museveni to become president. It is not worth it for me. However, I'm also aware that the times are not like they used to be. While anybody is skeptical and pessimistic about our chances to win a dictatorship through an election, I'm always reminded that we as young people are 85% of the population. The numbers are in our favor. And it should be noted that even the elders are very strongly behind our cause. But that said, I also know that from history, dictators have always been won. Look at the Gambia, where there was Yahya Jammeh. He was defeated democratically. So that is possible. But I also know that, yes, much as the Museveni has somehow gotten the military and all other institutions into his pocket, we have seen people like Omar el-Bashir of Sudan and Bouteflika of Algeria. They had more equipped armies, more organized, and they were, you know, well managed. But guess what? They are no more. So, yeah, the people prevailed. So, like we are told by great leaders like Mandela that it always seems impossible until it's done.
Gbenga, do you see an inauguration in 2021?
I hope, because there's a lot of pushback. People are desperate. And when you're going to be taking food away from a lot of people, when you've entrenched yourself in a system for over 33 years, you would put up a fight.
Absolutely.
And it's not going to be easy. They're not. We're in 2019 and you're looking at the pushback. Because of the POMA laws, more than 4, he can't assemble, he can't perform, he's hounded, he can't even go to parliament. They had to seize his official car because anywhere people see him ride, they gather, he's very popular. And it seems the more the government is trying to push back, it helps his popularity. So, let's hope something bad doesn't happen to him because, he's like a tsunami, he's a force to reckon with.
Just speaking on the topic of, the pushback and how difficult they're making it for any sort of campaigning to take place.
A whole law was made because of him.
So, on the one hand, we have POMA. On the other hand, we have social media tax because the president said that people on WhatsApp, on Twitter, are taking part in idle gossip. So how then will he be able to work around this so that you're seeing people discussing policies, getting past just discussing we want Museveni out of office and discussing more what are we going to do when we're actually a government in office, if we're a government in office.
And that's actually critical to what he was saying earlier about building institutions. Because you don't just want it to be a cult of one personality. But sometimes you need, it's almost like ways and means. You need that one personality to push the movement. And when you get there, the point is this personality going to be committed to then building the institutions after they get there? I don't know that he necessarily has the means to do that at the moment because there have been so many blocks, in his way. And there'll be many more. Yeah. But the question and the real test, I think, would be if he does attain, the presidency, will he then give the space for those institutions to be built?
Okay, and then finally, what do you say to your critics? Let's take a look. Finally, this is the final clip we're going to take on Bobbi Wine. This is what he has to say to his critics.
Well, we must remember that Museveni was called a bandit by Milton Obote. And anybody that calls us rubber riders or risers, I wouldn't blame them. We did not show up because we have a lot of experience. Personally, I'm not into this because I have so much knowledge in politics or so much experience in politics or the military. I'm into this because I'm desperate for freedom. We are into this because we want better. We want a better country where we matter. To begin with, we want to matter. We want our voice to be heard. So it does not matter whether I'm a border rider or I'm an artist or an educated young man or woman or an Okada rider. No, what matters is that we are Ugandans and we are just as worthy as anybody else. We are ghetto youths, but it's on our backs that the economy is built. We are the ones that work. We want all the policies to be favoring the people. And if that is decided by a vote, then we are going to use our vote to decide that. As simple as that.
And that's the man himself essentially saying again, he will not be stopped. The people will not be stopped. And he doesn't center himself on this movement. He really is saying that he's a part of a much bigger machinery.
It's a people movement.
It's a people's movement as the I don't want to say the party name.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that's all we have time for. We're playing out with Bobbi Wine's Situka, which means to rise up. Thank you for watching the conversation, which continues on social media. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to join in. And of course, you can keep up with all the latest news via our website, newscentral.africa. Remember, the exclusive is online already, www.newscentral.africa/BWI. We're playing out with Situka, which means to rise up. And we hope you enjoyed this episode of The Conversation. Bye for now.
So when the going gets tough, let's get going. Especially when leaders become misleaders, mentors become tormentors. Yaga, 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 yaga. Bimba. Omutima gumenye, sina inga chemanyi munywanyi na byawukana ku bye balaba ate abalala bo ne babyetama banyigirizibwa ne babulako gye balopa baabwe egye wandibadolopera kibeera kizibu okufunayo obwenkanya kugamba osigala wansi ensi bwe kusuula situkawo mangu tutambule munsi teri kyangu